guns, kept telling parties till the deed was done. Both George planned backfired, Nigel's day had come. Even the experts were shocked that we had won. Tories or Labour, Red Dems or Greens, Black Country, SNP or private screen, purple, blue, green, yellow, violet or red, no, just choose a rainbow of joy and peace instead. Except Mrs. May in her leather hose, and on and Remainer, so the story goes. Brexit means Brexit, don't tie my hands, I'll make it fit great, and Trump is our man. Britain needs leadership and stability, not tie some backbench debate or more scrutiny. We don't want opposition, open Sandals or JC. I'm a vicar's daughter, all you need is me. Tories or Labour,
Why I won't stand in Boris's December election. Boris Johnson has called a snap general election on Thursday the 12th of December 2019. Because I stood in Theresa May's snap election on the 8th of June 2017, several people have asked me encouragingly, will you be standing again? My answer is unequivocal. I won't be standing in Boris's election. Having been coronated by 199 Conservative MPs on the 7th of July 2016, Theresa May was barely a legitimate Prime Minister. She stepped into office on the 13th of July to clean up the mess left behind by Cameron and Osborne, but proceeded to make matters worse by stalling Brexit negotiations with the EU to hold an unnecessary election. I stood in May's 2017 June election on a point of principle: to end party politics. Party politics is damaging to and exacerbate our national problems. A truly democratic representational parliament is needed to form a consensus rainbow coalition to steer the United Kingdom through the difficult process of seceding from the EU. Only independent MPs, free from the whip, will end party politics. Since the 2016 referendum. Before the recent referendum, EU membership was not an issue of national concern. The seeds of destruction sprang from the long-standing schism within the Tory party, ineptly handled by David Cameron, and allowed to spew out like a pox and infect the country by holding an unnecessary referendum. Leavers were not expected to win, so Cameron gambled and lost. When a steady hand at the till was needed to navigate the uncertain political waters, Cameron jumped ship with his chum and Chancellor Osborne. In a bitter Tory leadership tussle, Mrs. May, a Remainer, emerged triumphant, mainly because her self-serving male rivals, Michael Gove and Boris Johnson, were too busy stabbing each other in the front and back. Perhaps as much to see off her enemies within her own party as to gain a predicted unassailable advantage over the Labour Party, Mrs. May went back on her word on the 18th of April 2017 to call a snap election. Buoyed by the polls, strong and stable Theresa imagined more than quadrupling Cameron's 2015 parliamentary majority of 10. But the leader of Her Majesty's loyal opposition, Jeremy Corbyn, turned out to be a good campaigner, and she was hopeless on the stump. Instead of gaining ground, Mrs. May lost her majority, and with it her authority at home and abroad. To govern, she entered a costly confidence and supply agreement with the right-wing extremist Unionist Party of Northern Ireland, the late Reverend Ian Paisley's DUP, now led by Arlene Foster. Never, never, never! Thus creating a conflict of interest with the Good Friday Agreement in Ireland. And, at the same time, there's a political logjam, which means Stormont is dormant, with no resurrection in sight. Mrs May, hamstrung by ERG hardliners like Jacob Rees-Mogg, and moderates like her Chancellor Philip Hammond within her own party, turned out to be just as bad at negotiation as she was at electioneering. Nonetheless, it is remarkable that she survived the brickbats, most from her own backbenchers, going through 3 Brexit secretaries, Davies, Raab and Barclay, and a no-confidence motion, to present her despised Brexit deal with its Irish backstop 3 times to be voted down by Parliament. She once boasted to EU leaders of being hard, but in truth she was just stubborn. Dislodging Mrs May from number 10 was just as difficult as finding a Brexit agreement, but when finally ousted, former columnist of The Spectator, London Mayor, Foreign Secretary and serially disloyal Boris Johnson led the baker's dozen of Conservatives vying for the reins of power, including Michael Gove, Andrea Leadsom, Rory Stewart and Sam Gyimah. Despite a litany of well-publicised gaffes, indiscretions and about-turns, a coterie of 140,000 ageing Conservatives members shoehorned Boris into number 10 in the hope and belief that the foppish old Etonian can outflank the wily Nigel Farage and his newly formed no-deal Brexit party, which took half the seats in the May 2019 EU elections forced on the UK when Mrs May missed her March Brexit deadline, and now boasts anti-EU MPs like former Conservative Anne Widdecombe, Claire Fox and Anusita Rees-Mogg, sister of Jacob, now Leader of the House. Boris led his successor as Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt in the 5th round of MPs' votes and was confirmed leader by Conservative members by almost 2-1. He crossed the threshold of number 10 on the 23rd of July 2019, brimming with bon ami, promising a spending splurge and to get Brexit done by the 31st of October, do or die. Fast forward 4 months. With total disregard for normal parliamentary conventions, Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who from day one seemed more interested in electioneering than negotiating a new Brexit agreement with the EU 27, misled the Queen to close down or prorogue Parliament in a clear attempt to govern without accountability. The Supreme Court ruled this to be illegal. When sittings were reinstated after 2 weeks on the 24th of September, Johnson's attempts to bully and bluster his programme through the House of Commons were defeated time and time again. As members of his own party either crossed the floor or were among 21 ejected by him for defying the whip to support the Benn Act, he squandered his working majority. Finally, he ditched his DUP partners at the last minute to cut a deal with the EU on Tuesday the 15th of October at the 11th hour. At an extraordinary sitting on Super Saturday the 19th of October, Boris's new EU Brexit deal, widely regarded by opponents as even worse than Theresa May's thrice-rejected deal, was put to MPs. But a Tory rebel, Sir Oliver Letwin, amended the bill, stopping its progress unless and until implementing legislation is passed. At this point, Johnson pulled his bill, knowing this amendment threatened his Halloween deadline. The Benn Act then forced Boris Johnson to send a letter to Brussels requesting a third extension beyond the 31st of October. Something he flamboyantly announced he would rather die in a ditch than do. On Monday the 21st of October, as expected, the controversial Speaker of the House, John Bercow, prevented another meaningful vote on Johnson's pulled deal, on the grounds that it was the same proposition presented to MPs on Saturday. So instead, the government presented its revised withdrawal agreement published on Sunday. This short bill passed, giving the Prime Minister his first and only parliamentary victory. But MPs voted against the following programme motion, which only allowed them 3 days to sign the 110-page withdrawal bill into law. Johnson again stopped proceedings. Are you following all of this? If you're the average man or woman in the street, this parliamentary pantomime is making your head spin, and, like a significant number of MPs, you're losing the will to live, or at least continue as MPs. You may even feel that Johnson's slogan, "Get Brexit Done," is not just necessary, but sensible and doable. But don't be bamboozled or deceived. Being fed up of hearing about Brexit is not a valid substitute for understanding what leaving the EU actually entails, and its implications for Europe, the UK, and individual citizens throughout the community with over 40 years of legal, cultural and political history of union. Boris would love you to believe that he can get Brexit done, when the truth is leaving the EU was always going to be a long and tangled, not to say messy, process. Even if Parliament rubber-stamped his deal and or withdrawal agreement today, years of negotiation to hammer out our new trading relationship with the EU lie ahead. 80% of UK trade is in the financial and services sectors. Neither Mrs May's or Boris Johnson's deals or withdrawal agreements settle issues on these vital areas of our relationship with the EU. These are economic ties that will have both direct and indirect impacts on the jobs and livelihoods of millions of UK citizens, not to mention the effect on our European partners. It's not that we can't leave or that we should not leave. It's that leaving the EU has real consequences, and responsible politicians are desperate to minimise any adverse outcomes from the decision blindly made on the 23rd of June 2016. Those promising the nation broad sunlit uplands are quite frankly snake oil merchants. It may be true that the future is brighter for them, their financial sponsors and acolytes, men and women like Nigel Farage living on the public purse, political parasites preying on the ignorance of the masses who accumulate wealth for themselves by hedging, insider trading, short selling, colluding with the rich and excluding poorer and less able citizens from access to the national cake. If May's 2017 election was an unnecessary distraction from the serious challenge of coming to an amicable divorce settlement with our EU partners and engage in earnest negotiations of a new trade agreement to favour all parties, then Johnson's December 2019 election is 10 times less necessary, given, as he has assured us, he's negotiated a great deal for the United Kingdom, England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Why shut down the government? Get Brexit done and implement your great deal. Instead, Johnson is pursuing the same self-interested path as his predecessor in what will prove to be a vain attempt to cement his position as Prime Minister and hold his fractured party together, no matter what the cost to our United Kingdom. But it takes two to tango, certainly in our electoral system supposedly governed by 5-year fixed-term parliaments, and we would not be having a winter election, the third election in 4 years, if Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party had not finally acquiesced. Undoubtedly, they believe that they are making a principled stand in an effort to get the Tories out and bring in a government for the many and not the few. But isn't the truth that Labour, also riven by Europe, has acted in the interest of its own party all along the way since the referendum result. One understands the reason why Labour politicians may be happy to see Brexit negotiations fail and the Conservatives dismantle the UK and steer Britain off the rails to crash into the buffers of economic reality. It may serve Labour's cause, but it doesn't serve the interests of the country. At a time when real consensus was necessary, as was being attempted by moderate MPs of all parties behind the scenes, in the national interest, party politics stood in the way. All parties, big and small, have taken up positions and decisions largely to serve their own interests. In doing so, we have witnessed the near complete trashing of the British parliamentary and political system as a whole. What is not required are sets of new MPs to toe political lines. What we need is a new system of government, a new constitution. This is not on offer in Boris's unnecessary election. What we're most likely to see is more of the same. Shambolic infighting witnessed the world over for the past 3.5 years. Many of the most experienced and committed parliamentarians are not standing in this election. Why is this? They know the system is being broken by unprincipled men, and they can no longer serve in a meaningful way. When I stood for Parliament in 2017, I believed it might be possible to work for a coalition consensus government to achieve an orderly exit from the EU. For me to stand now, even as an independent MP for Lincoln, would be like asking to be helicoptered onto the Titanic on the 14th of April 1912. There were not enough lifeboats, procedures were inadequate, Captain Edward Smith was experienced, but the challenge was overwhelming, and the choices were invidious. Jump, as some incumbents are now doing, or go down into the icy Atlantic fore or aft.
Primus green, purple, blue, green, yellow, orange, violet or red. No, just choose a rainbow of joy and peace instead. Don't be a hot Brexit, David. David's on the case. Ian Fox is on the trot. Boris is in a foreign place. Scotland Lions, Wales, they split the union for the part. But never fear, Theresa here has a best princess at heart. You needn't worry, we've got really friends. Give us all wickets back so that we're in charge again. Keep the migrants and refugees, just give us all your trade. And if the EU should fall apart, well, it isn't us to blame. Tories or Labour, Lib Dems or Greens, High Country, SNP or Primus Green, purple, blue, green, yellow.
Thank you. If you would like to know more about why I stood in May's June 2017 election, then keep your eyes peeled on my Facebook pages and YouTube channels for my warts and all, fly on the wall, no punches pulled documentary of my campaign as Lincoln's colourful candidate, where I hope to release the inside story of my flirtation with the Westminster political election process before Boris's unnecessary election.
Got my ballot paper here, so what I do is elect, put a cross in the person I want to be. So we've got all these people. We've got Nick Smith, Carl McCartney, Benjamin Jeffrey Lee Loriman, Karen Lee, Elizabeth, Caroline Kenyon, and Greyfield. So there we go. And then it's not going to be a mystery as to who I vote for, is it? I better take my guitar. Right, where's the box? Oh, it is. Ballot box number 25. That's it.
I didn't vote for the Conservatives.
All right, I believe you. Right, we're off. Jobs are good and cheers. We're taking this very seriously.
Sorry?
I said we're taking this very seriously. The future of the Western world is at stake.
I know.
Bye for now.